Okay, fantastic. All right, small dedicated crowd for 2 sports sessions right now, and the one I'm going to lead here is choosing the right business model for a sports platform. Now, in preparing this session and also in the conversation just now, what you find is it's super interesting to see how all these things work together, and it really covers all the kinds of business models there are and how you can work with them. And then sports is so specific because you have fan bases for specific sports all over the world in very different constellations. Now we're going to find out from our speakers. First, very briefly, Yannick Ramke, Head of OTT for OneFootball. David Evans, Commercial Director of the United Rugby Championship.
Yep.
Oh, you?
Sorry, no.
Oh, no. Alex Haug, CEO of the Professional Squash Association, medal-winning world champion. Bronze. Okay, but still. Philip Menner, Senior Director Media Rights of WRC Promoter, which is the World Rally Championship. Very specific. Now, let's start first with briefly explain what you represent. What does your organization do? OneFootball.
Thanks. Yeah, what's OneFootball? What's OneFootball about? Actually, it's a good question because we are often considered new kid on the block, digital first, new generation of football fans, etc., etc. But actually, the company is more than 15 years old by now. But at its core, it's a digital football media platform that provides a platform for all content creators, content owners in the football ecosystem to connect with a highly engaged audience. And those creators and content owners can be blogs, can be leagues, can be clubs, can be OTT,
you all have to
broadcasters, which might be super relevant for that kind of discussion. But ultimately, we are a matchmaker between content creators who produce content and seeking an audience, and an audience that craves content and gratification and entertainment, and we try to all of this package this up in a nice UX UI and make everybody happy.
And you have a 30 million in that people that have the OneFootball app on the phone and interact there.
So
then you have a sort of a wide label construction where you have another, 270 million? Lots of people, right?
So we are a mobile first company. Our mobile app complemented by a website and a connected TV app. We call it owned and operated. That's really where we fully own and can communicate to our users. 20 million. And then we have an owned and distributed business, which is an embed player essentially, where we make part of the content creators' content available off platform on websites of newspapers, publishers, and so on. So this is the owned and distributed, the embed player business, and those two things together, about 200 million.
Okay, 200 million. All right. You also had a big change in strategy, but we'll discuss that later. What about rugby? One of those sports that's all over the world, but not in the Netherlands, I must say. So.
No, maybe the next market. So United Rugby Championship is an amalgamation of 5 countries, 2 hemispheres. So South Africa just won the World Cup, is in our competition with the big 4 franchises there. As a brand, United Rugby Championship, this is our 3rd season. It just kicked off 2 weeks ago. But as an organisation, it's probably been 25, 30 years old through different iterations as rugby has professionalised and evolved in the last 30 years globally. We rebranded to the URC at the moment when CVC invested in us alongside Premiership Rugby and Six Nations. So that's part of their rugby portfolio. And ultimately, as the URC, we are less tied to historical structures around rugby, which can be quite political as we move from amateurism into professionalism in the last 30 years. So our mantra is to change the game and do things differently. So it's nice to kind of have these conversations around OTT and other revenue streams where ultimately rugby hasn't really played a part before.
So, where are the rugby fans in the world?
So our largest markets in our competition, Ireland, who were world number 1 before the World Cup, and then Wales, Scotland, Italy, and obviously South Africa are our biggest markets.
How did Italy end up in that list? I mean, that's a bit of a strange...
they are quite a strong rugby nation, relatively speaking, compared to, I guess, others. Yes, they are probably our weakest country. In our competition, we have huge strength in the likes of Leinster, who are usually the best team in Europe, the best team in our competition, and then possibly one of the weakest teams in Europe in our competition. So there is a bit of a stretch in terms of quality, but that's one of the challenges we're trying to overcome
Oh, it's not just about quality. It's just that surprising with Australia, South Africa. You sort of get it, and then
it's quite big. Yeah. So yeah,
all right.
You should check it out.
What about squash?
So hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Alex Goff. I'm the CEO of the Professional Squash Association. We run the men's and women's professional world squash tour. I'm an ex-player of about 15 years, and been CEO for probably about the same amount of time. So our venture into, I guess, what's the best business model for sports platform is we've been in the OTT space running something called Squash TV since 2010, which the first iteration of that was with the Perform group, who've then since gone on and developed into, well, one being Stats Perform, which is obviously pretty huge, and now also Perform then morphed into DAZN, which a lot of you will know. So yeah, we just, I guess.
But during the time that you played squash and now, I mean, squash is not a big TV sport, or has not been for a long time. It's more like
bigger.
It's getting bigger. It's even a part of the Olympics the next
Indeed.
time I just read. Yeah, so it's going from something you do to get fit to a sport with a lot of media properties and attention.
Yeah, we like to think so. So the conversations with LA28, who were kind enough to then give squash a go for the games in 5 years' time, a big part of it was the improvement in the broadcast. The fact that, again, probably when you go back sort of 10, 15 years, you couldn't see the ball, it was difficult to follow, nobody was filming it properly. So a big part of what we've done as a tour is actually take ownership of all that. So we actually produce all of our own broadcast pictures with an in-house team. So we do everything from sort of, running the tournaments, doing the broadcast, running the OTT platform. So the team's grown pretty steadily.
Because that's the thing, right? The sport itself owning also the rights and also defining how it gets filmed makes a big difference.
It's certainly made a big difference for a sport that's the size of squash. Obviously, you're competing with the likes of football and rugby and tennis and World Rally. Like it's tough for the sort of tier 2. We were probably tier 3 when we started. We're probably in that tier 2 bit now. Broadcast rights aren't. They're not flowing into squash. We get them, but it's there's slim pickings after the likes of the Premier League have taken kind of the lion's share and whatnot. So.
And what countries is squash really big in?
It's pretty global.
Yeah.
There's a lot of growth in the US at the moment. There's a lot of players out of Egypt. They've become a bit of a powerhouse in terms of players, which surprises some people. But we put a glass court out in the front of the pyramids out in Giza in Cairo. We can put the court, and that's kind of one of our USPs really, is we can pick the glass court up.
So you can get it sponsored. Anybody who wants to promote their country can have the glass court in there.
Anyway, yeah, so there's some cool locations.
That's a nice business model, yeah. What about rallies? I mean, explain a little bit what it is, because,
So we at WSC Promoter, we are the promoter of the FIA World Rally Championship. It is one of the biggest global motorsport championships in the world, and also one of the oldest. We're actually in the 51st season now already, so we have quite a lot of historic moments from the championship. I mean, a lot of people know the likes of Colin McRae, especially here in the UK, which is one of the most popular drivers of all time. So we are promoting the World Rally Championship since 2013, and we have.
And maybe you can explain, because squash is like a game a week and then championships in the specific length, but with rallies it's quite different.
Exactly. I mean, it is compared to other motorsports. It's very different in its nature. So I mean, it's a time trial. So you compete against the time. Whoever is fastest over. We normally start on a Thursday evening and finish on a Sunday. We normally have between 15 and 25 competitive stages, as we call it. So every stage counts, and whoever is fastest over the 15 to 25 stages wins actually the rally. So that makes it, of course, very exciting. When we took over as a promoter in 2013, the media product compared to what we are doing at the moment, and this is something we have heavily invested in over the last years when we took over the role as a promoter, was completely different. So from these 15 to 25 stages, you only had one stage produced live for broadcast and for the fans in the end. I mean, in the end, we do that for the fans as well. So you had a completely different media product when we took over the rights as the promoter. And we have invested heavily into the media product. And in 2018, only in 2018, we have actually launched our product called WSC All Live, which allowed the fans for the first time to watch every stage from every rally live. So compared to one stage and let's say 1.5 hours of live content, we now offer on average 25 hours of live content from a WSC weekend. So I mean,
how often per a year do you offer
yeah,
that?
so we have 13 events on the calendar. So quite a lot of live content we have available from our events. And yeah, I mean, we actually have done it a bit different now with your live product because not like other sports. We didn't test it with broadcasters first. We actually tested this all live product. I mean, tested is probably the wrong word, but we offered it to the fans via our own OTT in the first place, and only afterwards started to actually distribute the product to the broadcast partners. So exclusively in the beginning, it was only on our own OTT, and over the time only we have then started to actually distribute as well to the broadcast partners. But also we as a company have developed further. We also added 2 additional FIA championships to our portfolio over the last 2 years. So now we're also promoting the FIA European Rally Championship since last year, and since 2 years ago we also promote the FIA World Rallycross Championship. So now we actually have 3 championships that we're promoting, and across these 3 championships we now have 30 events per year with more than 600 hours of live content, which led to us then also rethinking our OTT strategy. And in August, actually, we launched a new product called Rally TV. And this is something.
Where everything comes together.
Yeah, because I mean, before we
dive into those models, because it's super interesting to find out more about those. Where are the fans? Who watches that?
I mean, we are a global sport. So I mean, we are a world championship. As said, we have 13 events per year. Also events all around the world. I mean,
But what countries are particularly interested in this?
I mean, some of our top markets are the market in Scandinavia. I mean, in Finland in particular, we're very strong. We have a world champion now, a 2-time world champion from Finland. I mean, in Finland, it's absolutely incredible how popular the sport is. Estonia, we have a driver there. So, I mean, we have markets like France. We have Sebastian Loeb, who's a 9-time world champion, Sebastian Ogier, 8-time world champion. So there's a strong history and tradition in the sport. But also markets like, and we go there next week, Japan are very strong. We see other markets like Spain, Italy, where we have a heritage as well, where motorsport itself is very popular. So we see a lot of overlap actually also with other motorsports. Wherever motorsport is popular, also we are actually popular. And yeah, I mean, we also want to develop that also for some of the other sports. For example, for the Rallycross, we have our first ever city event in Hong Kong on the weekend. So we also will go to new markets. We see really a lot of engagement from our key drivers are really the nationalities of the drivers, where the drivers are coming from, where we have events and also teams that are involved.
Now, I mean, some sports can be defined by one person, right? I mean, the Netherlands is full of Formula One fans because we have Max Verstappen. There's 5,000 Dutch people that travel wherever he goes. They travel along with him. You know, it's a business, a complete business on its own, just tickets and hotels. Let's talk about the business models and just list where the money comes from for each of your, propositions. In your case, where does the money come from?
I think one big difference is that we are not an IP owner, so in contrast to the other three guys, we are someone who has either buy IP, so rights, in order to then produce and distribute and monetize content, or, and this is the one and only business going forward, we are carrying third-party content, so whoever has rights, whether bought, if it's a broadcaster, or inherently, if it's a rights owner, we provide them a platform and a monetization toolbox to commercialize their content in a highly attractive environment, because our core audience is Gen Y, Gen Z, so the new generation of football.
Yeah, and as briefly mentioned, you had a big change there, right? Because you had to completely reorganize. Last time we spoke, there was still a huge interest in using Web3 and NFTs. I think
fair enough.
Left that behind, but also left behind the whole buying rights yourself.
Yeah, so we had a somewhat unclear market positioning into the B2B market, to exactly when to talk to guys like this, to rights owners and broadcasters. What are you? What are you about? Because for a long time we both licensed rights and we distributed content from other parties, from broadcasters who also license rights. So it was always the question, friend or enemy. If I talk to a DAZN or to a Sky, okay, look, today we discussed distribution agreements, but yesterday actually we competed in the same rights auction.
Yeah.
So what we did, and it was part and a downstream implication of all the reorganization at the company, we oftentimes prematurely, to also send a signal into the market, terminated all of our licensing agreements. So we do not have active license agreements with rights owners anymore. We tell them now, look, you figure out to whom you sell your rights, but please tell us, because then we engage with them for them to actually generate a return on their oftentimes big investment. If you lackluster, to be honest, female audience above a certain age, OneFootball might not be the go-to distribution or retail channel for that, but in a certain segment of the market, skewing rather young, we think we can support from big to small, from big broadcasters to small league if they have their own direct-to-consumer streaming service, that we can support their distribution and commercialization strategy.
So you, for the end consumer, you're sort of a destination. People go
but
there.
I have to answer your question. What do we sell and what are the products?
Yeah.
It's a single game pay-per-view, and it's season passes on a team or league basis. All of that on a transaction basis, so it's not a subscription. And therefore, we also define us as an e-commerce business rather than a subscription business. Because if I sold you one pay-per-view from Sky, my next objective is to sell you the next pay-per-view, the next season pass, which may or may not be from DAZN, from Globo, I mean, depending on the country where you are. But it's really for us an e-commerce business rather than subscription, acquisition, and retention business.
So for those rights owner, you take care of selling by game or by season. You do the whole transactions.
We do everything end-to-end, importantly. So we are not a reseller. So we host the content, we protect the content, we deliver the content, we have the customer support, all the transaction, and all the costs that also are attached to this one. It's an end-to-end solution with a built-in audience, ultimately.
And then you take a commission, 20 to 40%, I understand, for all that you do.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the only revenue stream coming in.
That is the only OTT revenue stream
very
coming
clear,
in. The OTT business is built upon a broader platform, which is mostly ad-supported, because we have also a bunch of other creators in the football ecosystem, like your small club blog, who writes about a certain team. If they hit enter on their website, via API, the same article is published on their account on OneFootball, pushed to the right audiences, monetized via display ads or similar integrations, equally, just at a much smaller scale and value. It's also like a revenue share agreement with the content creator in the football media landscape.
So advertising for those and
D2C,
part of the
we call it everything
that
is paid, directly paid by the customer is for us D2C. Everything that's ad supported is media.
Okay, so those two sources of income. What about you? Where does the money come from?
So in squash, it feels a bit simpler than that.
Yeah.
So primarily, obviously, we own and operate Squash TV, which is a subscription business. Then the live TV rights then go out to broadcasters. So that's kind of the second main one. So that's hopefully an ever-increasing.
And Squash TV, where can people buy it? It's OTT, or is it also online? Or
it's just all online, so global. Yeah. So we carve out, so any deals we do with broadcasters, we can still operate. There's no geo-blocking anywhere. It's completely global.
Yeah.
A couple of different price points. So if you're in India or Egypt, you'd pay less than if you're in kind of the US.
Okay.
Shouldn't say that to any VPN people out there, but and then the third revenue stream, which is also pretty clear, is the data and video betting rights. So we kind of manage our own kind of video rights, and then we use Sport Radar. We kind of have a joint venture with those guys for getting.
I didn't realize that there was betting in squash. I mean.
Yeah. It's not as big as obviously the likes of football. Obviously, it's the biggest in all of it. Tennis is probably the second biggest, I think, and they generate some crazy numbers actually. But squash is decent. Squash is okay.
Can you say anything about so much percentage-wise? So much comes from this, so much comes from
probably
that.
About Squash TV on its own is probably about 2/3.
Okay.
and then media rights probably 20%, and then betting rights probably 20%.
Okay.
And then there's just the last bit, which isn't necessarily too big, but it is actually okay. Is kind of YouTube kind of advertising. So we've got a couple of 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and all the sort of highlights, free highlights.
That's a free channel with highlights.
It would just be free, yeah. It was interesting when you had Rob on earlier from YouTube. We've just fired up the kind of the Prime,
the subscription,
subscription ones, but again, it's like a soft launch. It's just
not bringing in a lot of new subscribers yet.
Might get you a couple of coffees a month at the minute. I guess the only other interesting one, and this is a new thing as well, which is on Amazon Prime, as we've just launched. So essentially, where you can buy all the channels within Prime Video. So in the US, you can now get Squash TV on Prime, which was a bit of a headache technically. I must admit, it was a pretty big operation for, especially for the size of us, but we've managed it now, and that launched about 2 weeks ago, and that's actually started off really positively.
Okay.
So we're hopeful that that's going to be a really good one.
Yeah. So on Prime.
Yeah.
Rugby.
I guess as a rights holder, relatively traditional in terms of the weighting and then the source of income. So broadcast, obviously number one. The sponsorship, which is quite strong. We have major events. Our final for the last 2 years has been in Cape Town City Stadium, because the Stormers have been the top seeded team. We're looking We're looking at other events as well. Outside of, I guess, our final series, we have Judgment Day, which is played in Principality Stadium. On that point, though, with all our revenue streams, you've also got the clubs making their revenue week in, week out. So that's where you've got the majority of ticket sales, licensing revenue, again, hospitality, those income streams that aren't necessarily controlled by the rights holder. They're still very large if you take the sum of the league and what's important to our stakeholders, because all of our profits go back to our stakeholders.
Yeah, and you have a lot of stakeholders, right?
Well, through the clubs we have our unions who are our shareholders. It's a fully distributed. And then other things such as we have a digital collectibles or NFT deal. We did that recently. We're looking at betting because rugby hasn't really got space in that, so that's something that really rugby has been left behind on, but it's a combination of data, it's a combination of streaming, it's kind of an amalgamation of everything, but building relevancy in that space, identifying opportunities that start building out that kind of more micro-transactional economy, such as where OneFootball operates, called e-commerce, but people transacting for the purpose of a singular transaction or something that they want at that time. And then there's licensing and other areas. So it's quite broad, but really...
It sounds like you're also really testing out things. I mean, the NFT example, for instance?
Yeah, the NFT thing, definitely testing it out. Rugby...
What kind of NFTs is like?
So our archive, basically digitising our archive, which was digitised anyway, but monetising that to fans. The market was there. Obviously, it went through a massive trough last year, but the interest was still there, and we thought it was an opportunity to engage with those younger fans. Rugby audiences traditionally are more mature, very kind of in the wealthy demographics. Mm-hmm. So how can we attract that younger audience? Rugby, you could argue, is going through a bit of a challenge in terms of how does it appeal to that younger audience in terms of the head injuries and what's it mean? It's quite a hard game to describe. So how can we bring the game of rugby, which is a fantastic sport, into the hands of the younger audiences? So there's plenty going on. And then the last one we also have, again, is a distribution via our shareholding in European Champions Cup, which is the now Investec Champions Cup. But we, as a third shareholder, get a distribution from that. But again, that's just replicating our business model on another stage, which is across Europe as opposed to within our competition.
There's a lot of models there. Eh? What about...
Yeah. I mean, for us, traditionally, of course, it's similar to you. I mean, we have, on the media side, still, of course, deals with our traditional broadcast partners. We have around 50 broadcast partners now around the world for our content, for the WSC. And then the other revenue is coming from our own OTT service subscription revenues. That's what we have at the moment. But one of the reasons why we have launched Reality TV is we also want to find new ways of how we can actually monetize, distribute, commercialize our rights. Just want to mention a couple of examples related to that. So on Reality TV, for example, we have integrated a 24/7 linear pay TV channel, which you can get as part of the Reality TV subscription if you're a Reality TV subscriber. But what we can also do with this linear pay channel, we can also do carriage agreements with any TV operator that, for example, is interested in carrying that channel. as part of the sports pay TV package that they're offering. That's not possible in all of the markets due to broadcast agreements, but it's another way for us on how we can actually distribute the content in a relatively easy way. It's a plug-and-play solution because it's all with English commentary, for example.
And can they also then take that channel and add commercials to it, make it advertising-based, or?
This is another example that I just wanted to mention. We actually also, this is a global pay TV channel, which is more or less one feed, but we are also looking into having more local partnerships with this channel. So one of the examples actually is Poland. In Poland, we have started Ready TV at the beginning of the year together with a partner there that already has an existing motorsport channel. And what we have done with that partner, they have had that local channel for 10 years, primarily focusing on local national Polish motorsport. What we have done with them is we created a branded block on their existing channel with the existing reach that they had by the end of 2022. So we created a branded Rally TV block on that channel, starting with Rally Monte Carlo, which is always the first event of the season. And it's been a tremendous success because that channel now has been ranked during the whole WRC season among the top 3 sports channels during every WRC weekend. And sports channels includes like channels that also show football, which is still the most popular sport in Poland. And we had a solid distribution when we started the cooperation at the beginning of the year. But due to the success of the channel, also the remaining operators that didn't carry the channel so far were actually seeing the success of the channel, and they also wanted it. And that's a model we have implemented now in Poland, and we want to replicate that. One of the key success factors there, and that's why I said local partnerships, really is the localization. They have everything in Polish commentary. We're selling local advertising. They have an own studio during every WC weekend with known experts from Poland. And also the commentators are known commentators who would normally commentate Formula One. So really to make this a local home, it's been really a key differentiator and a key success factor for us. That's just an example of what we are trying to establish now as well with this new, Red TV it's an OTT, but it's also a new brand that we are creating with the OTT, the linear pay channel, local channels, and then something we are also looking into like fast channels moving forward. But the definition of fast, and we can talk about that later maybe, it's also an interesting one, how it started and how it's developing. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
Just wanted to make one point because I want to avoid the impression that advertising and ad-funded revenue model is our bread and butter. It's where we come from. We have now OTT, but sure, the advertising supported model is also extended into all things video. And here again, we want to provide a toolbox for rights holders. If a rights holder has a ready-made live stream with, for example, Scotty markers, yes, we have a solution in the toolbox, dynamic ad insertion. We can even replace their advertising block, sell incrementally against it, and so on. So actually our core business ad support is also reflected in all things OTT, which is either paid, then it comes to the whole e-commerce business. But if we work together with a commercial free-to-air linear channel, sure, then we also have an ad-supported solution for them, whether it's just extending their reach and they sell it together with the linear audience, or we replace the advertising blocks and sell the digital inventory.
So you bring the audience and you bring the technology, the platform, whereas for the others, it seems that the development of the business model in a lot of ways is also extending the fan base in unexpected territories. Does this attempt to make a sport bigger so that you can make more money from it, or it's more viable as a proposition, also change the sport? Do you have business models that influence how the sport is organized? I can imagine that if you do, 3 days of rally, it makes sense to chop it up in 10 segments, so you have 10 times to go to sleep, whatever.
I guess from rugby's point of view, or for our competition, our strength is also one of our challenges in that we are spread across 5 countries, 2 hemispheres. The history of our competition meant that South Africa joined us because it makes sense on a time zone point of view, as opposed to them playing against Australia and New Zealand. So suddenly you are, I guess, building a product that is focused on what the fans want and appealing to your broadcasters and your sponsors, but it just makes more commercial sense. Our own OTT product, for context, we have 7 linear broadcast partners across our countries, which is quite a lot to manage. And in some countries like South Africa, where Supersport is the number one, like Sky Sports here, does a fantastic job, and Supersport is in the majority of homes, so it does a great job of telling the story. In markets where it's more cluttered, where rugby struggles sometimes to have the loudest voice in the room, because obviously football and other sports, sometimes one might want to control the way our product is going to our customers, and that's where something like OTT can appeal to a younger audience. We can tailor how it's propositioned, we can tailor how it's marketed, even though...
Yeah, but you tailor the media side of it. You don't change the sport for it.
Exactly, you are just putting the product in the best place possible to attract the audience. We wouldn't necessarily start chopping and changing the sport itself, because then you're really struggling. It's complicated as it is.
Yeah.
Maybe I can take this, because we as a platform, we don't have a seat at the table. I mean, we are not involved in such decision making, but I would say we have a front row seat, because what we are saying then are the downstream implications. And there we see huge differences. We have, for example, a La Liga, which the zone is a rights holder in Germany for. The zone is distributed via OneFootball in Germany and Austria. Okay, how do we get the content onto the platform? For La Liga, the zone, we have literally a linear feed, because their schedule is spread out from Friday night to Monday night. Like, there is no programming window where 2 games are playing at the same time. So these are like the downstream implications. Then on the technical side, customer support side that we are feeling. I can give you also an example of the Indian Super League. They have 1 match per day, so they are taking it to the maximum. Yeah. And then we see, for example, the Bundesliga, which is via a broadcaster in Brazil on OneFootball, which still has this traditional time window, Saturdays afternoons, 3:30 p.m., like 5 matches at the same time, this core schedule. Yeah. So we just see the downstream implication of this media optimization, because ultimately sports, especially for top of the pyramid, has become a media product, right?
It's a media product,
it's where the money is.
Yeah.
So we just see which are interesting, but probably not thought about the downstream implication. Okay, do I need like 5, 6, 10 ingests because I have a bunch of simultaneously played games, or can I cover an entire competition with one 24/7 linear feed, because it's the Spanish La Liga, with taking it to the extreme when it comes to slicing and dicing and maximizing.
And I definitely did that because of
it's about maximizing the exclusive broadcasting minutes, right? That each broadcasting minute is like not competing against like the same product in a different
same audience. Yes, let's see. Maybe we can briefly discuss. I'm looking at the time. Yeah, maybe we can briefly discuss what you see changing in the market, and then specifically look at fast channels. But for all of you, what is the change you see this year? Is there something happening to your revenue streams that's unexpected, that's new, so you see growth anywhere that you didn't see before? Do you see the evolution of the OTT market and everything around it taking place in your sports? What's new? Or is it basically we're building, and it's little steps along the way? This happens, eh? Some years everything changes, some years everything stays the same.
I mean, I think, and I guess a lot of people, everyone agrees in the room, there's a lot of changes happening in the whole media landscape at the moment. And that's also one of the reasons why we have invested.
And what's the change that's most important for you? Things are changing, but...
I guess on the broadcast side in many markets, we have, to be honest, seen some challenges in some markets which have been quite strong for us in the past, where budgets have been cut, budgets have been shifted, cost saving measures were coming into place. At the same time, of course, we also see new opportunities coming up on what we can do, especially with our own platform. So that's why we, for example, as a company, have decided that we invest into our own platform and our own capabilities to distribute content, for example, via our own TV channel.
Directly to the consumer.
Or free channel, in order to be able to address potential challenges that we might face. This might be a couple of examples at the moment in some of the markets that we see, but it might not be the only ones in the future. Who knows? Look, we still have very strong and fantastic broadcast partners which do a great job and that we really love working together with. But there were also some surprises, and in order to be able to address some of those surprises, we really invested into this product in order to really be able to
be relatively independent.
Exactly.
in your way
Yeah,
forward.
exactly.
And yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think from squash's point of view, what's interesting to see is how many other sports, especially like I say, after football and after some of the bigger sports, have all taken control of their own kind of destiny, because they do find it more difficult to get more and more broadcasters on. And then when we go into a world where the broadcasters are ultimately, maybe their revenues are coming down because everyone's got more choice, right? So the cable cutters, we all hear of people coming away from Sky or coming away from those things. So when you're ultimately in charge of your own subscriber base and your own kind of platform, you can actually sort of future-proof yourself a bit and protect yourself a bit. And I think that's something that we found is pretty important over the last few years, just to make sure that you've got your hands it's in your own sort of hands really to protect yourself.
And the discussion here is largely going around broadcasters, OTT channels, and maybe offering things online or on mobile. But sports is so much a fan-based economy, where really dedicated fans who want much more from a sport than anybody could ever imagine. So, do you have very focused social media strategies, for instance, to reach those fans and get them close to you?
Yeah, I can carry on quickly there. Yeah, absolutely. And that always changes, doesn't it? Obviously, Facebook was the biggest before, and then it's Instagram, and now TikTok's exploding. So you've just, again, from a smaller sport point of view, we're sort of starting to get slightly bigger teams now that can maximise that and address that. But it's why news for us, like LA 28, is so massive, because it will get that. It will get a broader reach, and more people will be sort of hopefully playing, but then you've got to turn that into converting people into fans, so you need that presence.
So at the moment it's more a marketing channel than a potential revenue channel.
Yes, absolutely that.
Yeah.
Maybe I can add something. So I think there has been consensus, not only in this row but in this room, that there's a bunch of change, and change might imply, or probably implies, that the same stuff doesn't work anymore in the future. It doesn't change the fact, and even I, representing like a digital-only platform business, that the traditional pay TV model is still the most powerful revenue engine in the sports media industry, especially for top-of-the-tail properties. No questions asked, it is what it is. But it's like, as you said, downward trend, downward pressure, so you have to build up more nascent revenue streams that might be small today, but might be bigger in the future. And how we think we can contribute to solving that problem is across three different things. It's the new generation of fans, I think, has a cost barrier to access the content, has a discovery barrier, and the technology barrier. Cost barrier, I think it's quite self-explanatory. We want to make it more flexible, so single game pay-per-view, reducing the barrier to access the content. Discovery, huge issue, not for the die-hard squash fans. They do know where to check out the content, but ultimately the problem with the diehards is there's a limited amount of them. It's now rocket science to reach, engage, and convert the diehards. But
for squash, the fans are squash players, but for rallies, it's pretty much anybody. You don't need to be a rally driver to be interested in rallies, right? Or you don't need to play rugby to be interested in rugby. But for squash, it's very focused.
It seems to be, hopefully we'll get a bit more out of that.
After the Olympics, it will be different.
And after cost, after discovery and awareness, it's then technology. If certain content is not available over the top of satellite cable providers, but they are just not in this linear satellite cable distribution system, this audience is pretty much, I'm punting on that audience because I can't reach them. So it's like via internet, mobile, and so on. And we just try to solve across those three dimensions, cost, discovery, and technology, to reach the new generation of fans. But as said, yes, it is in a secular decline and it's getting smaller, but the revenues that the top of the pyramid sports are still depending on is made from traditional pay TV, and they still and will continue to play a vital role to keep the ecosystem.
And they have enormous budgets as well. It's really big.
Yeah, I was going to say probably for us this year, it's kind of consolidating what's happened in the first two seasons as a branded URC, but building on everything that we've discussed here. building on knowing our fan base better. Everything that we now do is through single sign-on, no matter what platform it's on, it's integrated. So we're getting to know our customers, identifying ways that we can get to know those fan bases better, so complete those records or just increase the number of people we know. Because when it comes to going to broadcast and future broadcast conversations, it's about the value that we can bring to an alternative. We're in the middle of cycles right now, but we're not kind of taking a step back and just letting it watch it go to the end of the cycle. We need to start working now, and there's plenty in the pipeline to do that. I think a good example from the World Cup, the largest World Cup predictor game had over 400,000 people play. We have a strategic partnership with them. They're people we can access as a marketing channel, but equally from that, over 25% of those actually signed up to hear directly from the URC. So suddenly you're kind of opening up that channel and increasing that web of people you can talk to across all the revenue streams we've discussed, particularly things like OTT and in the future betting, that kind of stuff. So it's a case of identifying, acting quite fast, and maybe just moving away from the things you don't think are credible right now, and identifying ways to exploit or explore opportunities that maybe are more mature revenue streams in other sports.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, for us also not an either or. It's really, we want to create the options for the people where they want to watch the content. They shall have to watch it. I mean, there's still a lot of people who want to watch it on the traditional broadcast. We still want to continue to work with our broadcast partners. But there are also people, especially the younger generation, they don't want to watch it maybe on the broadcasters, and we create them different options. And that's really what we want to do as well with our owned and operated platforms.
I think it's also like a mandate for rights owners in partnership with broadcasters on OTT to really slice and dice, segment or discriminate even across the marketplace, because different audiences have different needs, also different willingness to pay, different places where they are interacting in the first place. And I often think as someone, or as we like overseeing top down the entire revenue and distribution mix, we overestimate the one consumer in the one segment is not caring at all, might not even be aware where the product is priced, packaged, available elsewhere. They must be happy with the solution that they are engaging with. If it's more expensive, less expensive, only available on a mobile device or all screens or whatever, that they don't care. But it must fit a different segment of the audience that you want to address. So really segmenting the market and have then a fit for that segment solution. I think it's much more complex nowadays than it might have been in the past, where it was like one size fits all and it worked well.
We almost have to wrap up, unfortunately. There's two things that are very specific for sports. Is that once the game is played or the race is driven, the value of the content diminishes very fast, right? I mean, so I'm really curious about archives, and I can tell you, my father-in-law, when there's no competition going on, he will actually watch World Cup games from the last 20 years. You know, he's in that particular segment that it's still relevant to him. But for you guys, the rights owners here, once a recording has been made, people have consumed it live, is there a value, a profit center still to be had from all those archives? Or people still want to see some of it? Can you dice and slice it in a way that, you know, the top 10 of the most favorite speaker or as player or something like this? I'm just curious if there's just cost or if there's a profit there.
Well, I suppose that's where, as I mentioned earlier, getting involved in NFTs and Web3, that's kind of where we're focusing based on the rights that we can access as the rights holder into our archive. It isn't so much the content, because you can watch that content anywhere through YouTube or anywhere else it's been distributed, but attaching money can't buy experiences and real life experiences to connect to fans, and giving things that they can't otherwise access through archive content is one way of doing that.
Yeah.
With the whole kind of OTT channel and owning your own OTT channel, which we do, but then also realising that YouTube is probably still number one place where our highlights are viewed.
Yeah.
We shouldn't cut off YouTube, and we'd still want to use it because it's a great marketing channel for us. That's where the majority of views come from. But what can we do with our archive on our side is something definitely we're trying to actively.
I'm just surprised. I mean, if you look at it's probably because I clicked on the wrong things, but I looked at my own Instagram feed. I get all these 5-second, 6-7-second scenes from old Hollywood movies served up to me these days. I mean, I clicked on something for sure, but it's just that there's somebody out there who's picking things and throwing them into the mix and making money off it, because otherwise I wouldn't do it. Yeah. I'm just curious about it.
I mean, specifically, we've sort of touched upon Fast Channel. Obviously, that's come over from the US, and that's seemingly growing and going to be. I mean, the projections over the next 5 or 10 years are seemingly massive. So we're entering into one of those in terms of, and that will be a lot of archive. It'll be a 24/7 channel. So you are going to have to repurpose a lot of this archive. So that's going to be an interesting one to see. For us, it just feels like we may as well try it.
Yeah.
We don't know. It's really hard to predict. You know, especially as a smaller sport. But I was on a couple earlier. I was on Sports Tribal, and there's just mountains and mountains and mountains of sport on there, and some sort of low level, some's not very well produced, some's great. There are some hidden gems in there. So for us, it's a perfect place to be, where you're going to hopefully scoop up some, tennis fans that are watching World Team Tennis, or or just some of those other random sports fans that just will hoover up any content, and then they might like squash.
Like the sound of squash and put it on.
Yes, exactly.
Something like that.
Maybe just one overarching thought, like outside looking in, not sitting on that IP forever, where you may look for a second and third opportunity to utilize and commercialize. I think this is also like, ultimately sports competes in the video entertainment marketplace, which a bunch of other genres that both have advantages, disadvantages. I think you mentioned one distinct one, this shelf lifetime of sports is very short but powerful. At the same time, for example, you can make the argument sports is, there's no substitute to sport. If my favorite team is playing, if you serve me a different team, I just don't care. In general entertainment, look, if I watch this or the other series, it might be more of a substitute.
The value is
so it's all like, I mean, ultimately everybody, sports and beyond, competes for the same consumer, for the same limited resources of such consumer time and money that they allocate and spend according to preferences. I think sports is unique. This is also why still traditional broadcasters are so interested in sports. But then, like archive, what is the revenue model to utilize archive over and over again? But I think, as the guy said, there is stuff in the making. And
I guess it also depends on how you define archive. I mean, if we take our archive and create stories out of that archive, I mean, I think it's a huge value. And
of the history of a particular
absolutely,
driver,
of a driver or of an event or of a
so you can build a lot of
or something. I mean, I think it's a
build other media
value.
properties outside of the archive.
Absolutely, and we see that. I mean, when we build those stories, those programs, I think there's a huge value in there. But you need to do it, of course.
It's a lot of work. We have to wrap up this. And there's another sports panel coming, so don't go away. I thought it was super interesting. Thank you guys so much. And sorry that it didn't cover all the questions, because we had more fast channels, for instance. Julian, you're coming here to talk about how to reach sports fans. So there we go. Thank you.
Thanks.